Friday morning, can't control it. Fired up and counting every minute. Hands are shaking, eyes are burning. The time has come, yeah, this is not a warning. The week was just so long, we had to let it go. Our problems disappeared, we're not tied up anymore. The weekend is here. Sunday calls, we are sick and tired. Up and down, can you feel it? Up and down.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Johansson show. It's Kurt, and today I won't say it's a great guest. It's a super guest. We've got a super heavyweight, 18-year veteran here in the UK. He's a henchman, the king of beasts, Jim Diehard. Jim, thank you for coming on.
No problem, Kurt. Thanks for the invite, bud.
Yeah, really excited. From people seem excited on Twitter. Kian, who I interviewed previously, he just sang your praises and was like, this is somebody else you need to get on the show. Let people find out more about him. And then I'd seen your name pop up with people suggesting you as the heavyweight to Andy Corden of Rev Pro when he was asking some of the top heavyweights. So, yeah, thank you for coming on the show.
No problem, man. That's always nice when people recommend you for stuff. You know, it's never... It's sort of when it's your pals are just kind of saying, I'll put a word in for you. But when you see them actually go ahead and do it, you know, it's always nice to see people are actually looking out for you, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got the look. Like, at the end of the day, nobody's going to look at you and think, I don't know if he's going to be intimidating enough. I don't know if he's going to be big or bad enough. And there's a reason why you've been in for around 18 years. There's a reason for that, and it's because your body of work from the research I've seen is fantastic, and the presentation's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's very kind of you to say that. I think it's something that, like, I think it gets lost a little bit now. Like, everybody wants to be sort of the cool wrestler in the trunks and boots and all that kind of thing. But I don't know, like, if you get 10 of those guys on a poster, you kind of get lost a little bit. So I think there's room for a bit of variety all over, really. Like, just try and make yourself stand out is what I always tell guys whenever I do coaching. It's the number one thing. Like, obviously, you've got to know how to do the job. But if you can stand out from the crowd, people suddenly, you know, they'll go, oh, what's this guy? You know, what's he about? And try and find out more. And that's what I try to do now, is just basically look like the kind of wrestler that I would have wanted to see when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And, like, no disrespect to, like, the presentation, I think over the past couple of years, you mentioned it yourself, a lot of people wearing the kick pads. Wrestling had changed to some degree, and then I think over the past couple of years, people have somewhat got bored because it's sometimes the same stuff on the same show constantly, where here's wrestler A and B, they have a match, then match 2, exactly the same, match 3, exactly the same. And now these guys like yourself, when you come out, everyone's like, oh shit, this is going to be different. This is going to be intense.
I think, like, it goes in waves, you know. It has its trends like anything else. That what's trendy for this year, okay, we've seen that now. Let's move on to the next thing. And it's just, like, 18 years in, like, trying to stay relevant is, like, it's so difficult, and, like, everywhere's looking for something different. So there isn't really a one size fits all. The best thing you can hope for is that a promoter will directly tell you what it is they're looking for, what their audience is looking for, and try and fit that mold, you know.
No, 100%. And about, like, adapting as well, it seems like you've had a couple of names over the years. I believe one was starting with Jekyll, and then the second one was it Quentin Hyde Styles?
Yeah, that was my double barrel it boy hipster kind of guy that I tried out for a little while. Like you say, I mean, you're going back to when I was like a teenager, and the scene was like nothing like it is now. Like, I don't want to be one of them back in my day guys. I'm only 35, like, but not to be one of the back in my day guys. But the scene was so different then, and it was just kind of, I don't know if you've managed to find any pictures on you at all, but it was the same sort of thing. I started with one look, tried to evolve it a little, tried a different gimmick, and evolve that. Yeah, just throw stuff and see what sticks, as the saying goes.
Yeah. Would you say, like, if you ended up getting all the different pictures of your transitions, do you think it'd tell that story if you've started out like this and then before we know it, we've got the King of Beasts?
I did it recently. If you have a look on my Instagram, I did there's like a 10 photo transition of like from the very first promo photo I took down with Hammerlock right up until like the most recent one I did just before the lockdown happened. And that was just cool for me to see that as myself, let alone anybody else. Like, there's a lot of people that see how I am now that would have no idea of the stuff I was doing, way back then.
So speaking of like way back then, like what was your first like introduction to professional wrestling, like even as a fan, and when you thought, wow, I love this and I want to do it as a career?
I can remember, I don't quite know what the timeline was, but I remember my cousin turned up at my house one day, like how cousins do, like came over for the weekend or whatever, and he had 3 tapes with him that were like VHS recorded off the TV with WWF stickers over them.
Yeah.
And it was Royal Rumble 1990, Royal Rumble 91, and SummerSlam 91. And I just watched those 3 tapes over and over again. I was just from the get-go, like, and particularly I always tell people when I saw the Legion of Doom and the Big Boss Man and the match between Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, and then from then I was just like even before you even get to like the Hulk Hogan stuff, those are the guys that I was looking at going, all right, I don't know what this is, but I want to see more of it.
Yeah.
And then I can remember a little later on, like being at my grandparents' house, and that was when WCW was on TV for a little while on ITV.
Yeah.
And I got to see like Vader on there was the guy that stuck with me really there, which is like he's a massive influence to this day. I want to watch a lot of Vader stuff.
Now Vader, the fact that he isn't in the Hall of Fame yet is stupid. I think when you think of super heavyweights, there's the reason why he's known as one of the best gaijins in Japan, because his body of work is fantastic.
He just strikes that terror into people, especially in Japan, like you say, when he came out with the head thing and all that, and just blowing steam all over the place and whipping chairs across the hall. He was so huge and unpredictable. It was literally like they'd set a bull loose in an arena.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. So, like, fast forward a couple of years, then, like, when did you think, I want to do this? Like, I need to start looking at some training schools.
So we were like, we're talking like 99, 2000 here, Attitude Era time. And it was like the biggest thing when so I'm like 14, 15 by this time. And it's like all I'm talking about is I've got like my little clique of buddies at school, and all we're talking about is watching Raw, WWF, Attitude Era, Steve Austin, DX, and all that sort of thing. And then the other side of that, we wanted to go watch some live wrestling. And in the local paper, I see this advert for NWA UK is running a show at Bedworth Civic Hall, which is about 10 miles from me.
Yeah.
So a bunch of us, like, we thought, it's just going to be a local show. How good can it be? And we went over to watch it. And like by the end of it, we were like, a couple of us were like, we could do this. We could actually go and do this. And the first attempt that we made, we started putting together backyard tapes that we were going to send off to the promoter. I'm so glad to this day that those tapes never saw the light of day. As it happened, they opened up a second school in Coventry, which was easy for me. Like, we just went over there straight away.
Nah, that's great. Like, what was the experience of when you walked through the door? Like, obviously you're an absolute beast now, hence the name King of Beasts, but was you like that when you were like 15, 16?
So I was just turned 16, and it was at a Aikido center in Coventry, and there was quite a good turnout, but there was a couple of bigger guys there, and then there was a load of sort of smaller guys there. So I kind of fit right in the middle. There was even like blokes there that I was like, okay, I'm bigger than this guy. I'm bigger than you. Size everybody up straight away.
Yeah.
And then we had on the first day we had Magic, who went on to be my coach, and there was a fella called Paul Beswick who wrestled as Paul Vault. He was a pretty legit athlete. Like, he was competitive level pole vaulter, hence the name Paul Vault. Yeah. Kind of. He was a contestant on Gladiators way back when, and he was one of the guys. Like, he was the body guy on the Hammerlock shows he was a body guy that could do a backflip, but there weren't a whole lot else going on to him there. And he just brutalized us all day, so bad that Ben, who is my tag partner now, decided he wasn't going to go back.
Yeah.
But there was no talking me down. This was the first ever session that they ran, and I went back the next week, and it was just Magic coaching, and it was fine from then on. It mellowed out a little bit there.
it's great to know the fact that your tag partner now, like 20 years on, is the person that you'd gone training with. Like,
so
that.
we actually met in school when we were, I would say, 12 or 13.
Oh wow.
So we bonded over pro wrestling and Insane Clown Posse when we were 12, 13 years old. This is giving away my age now, but yeah.
Wow. No, that's great to see. So, like, I know it's jumping forward a bit, but how does it feel, the fact that somebody you've grown up with and is your tag team partner and you're wreaking havoc on the UK wrestling scene?
I mean, it kind of came from we were both at a point where we were saying, this isn't working out for us at all. We were both, getting on for 30, and we were like, we're not clicking anywhere. We're not people are not looking for us. And we were both pretty close to calling it a day, because we were kind of like miserable and bitter towards guys that were younger than us, that were doing better than us. As I think a lot of people go through that at some point. So we thought, all right, well, let's make a gimmick out of that and be them sort of bloated, washed up 80s guys that just complain about the younger people and just want to beat up the younger wrestlers and spoil everybody's fun. And we just threw together. He was working a job at a community centre at the time, and we managed to get access to there. And we just shot some footage of us just doing 80s guys stuff, like wearing Zubaz and drinking protein and drinking whiskey and doing bicep curls and oiling ourselves up, tanning kind of thing. And we set it to a song from the film Commando.
Yeah.
There's the end theme to that, and we just set it to that and did like star fades and stuff like that. And we put it on YouTube and on Facebook and everything. And like within a couple of days, it had like 3,000 views or something like that. And we had like guys like Spud were putting it out to everybody and retweeting it and stuff like that. And it just, before we'd even had a match, there was no wrestling involved. We'd never had a match. It was just costumes, made the silly video, and people just got behind it. And then we started getting inquiries like straight away. People wanted to put us on. We had no tag team stuff whatsoever. We were just improvising completely,
Oh shit! Now we actually have to wrestle.
Yeah, that's it.
So
we didn't even have
So going back to the beginning then, and you've gone to the Hammerlock place in Coventry, and how long had you been training until you made your debut?
So it was around about 8 months. I started training in the July, and I had my first show was on the March the following year, which was just a rumble at Bedworth Civic Hall, which was where we'd gone to watch them in the first place. I'd gone down and done a couple of like weekend camps down at the main Hammerlock Centre down in Kent, which was absolutely insane to say the least. Like, it was a proper shooter gym. There was a busted old Wilder Sport ring with a big dip in the middle that like so many guys came through those doors. So like when I was down there, the first night I went down there was a show on, and that's when Finn Balor had his debut that night. And I was backstage just hoping I was going to get picked for a match. But like the camps, you had guys like Zack Sabre Jr. were down there, and it was a real good team. Johnny Moss, John Ryan, it was a great team down there. And then eventually it came out like basically the promoter just wanted some guys to fill the rumble up and ask Magic for local guys, because we were all so close, like nearby. And he picked like 4 or 5 guys, and I was one of the guys that got on that day.
So what was that like? What was that experience like then? The fact that like we're going to give you a shot, you're in the rumble.
It was exciting. It was scary. I had to get gear together in like very quickly. Like I just had some attitude boots, and suddenly I had to have a gimmick and a costume by. This was on the Sunday. They told us, and by Friday I had to have stuff ready to go. So that was hectic. That's where the Jekyll thing came from. An Insane Clown Posse album was called the Amazing Jekyll Brothers. So I just stole that name off there. My auntie is a seamstress for like her kids were dancers. So her being a seamstress, she managed to run some gear together for me like pretty quick. I had this mask that I'd got imported, and And yeah, I went with this whole black and white Slipknot looking guy called Jekyll. And so the show itself was, yeah, it was, being backstage was terrifying, because it was all like at training I was kind of one of the top dogs, but then suddenly you go into that real world where everyone's bigger than you, they don't want you around, they're going to try and weed out the people they don't want to be there. You know, it had that sort of old school thing about it.
Yeah.
I remember Jim the Anvil Neidhart was there. He was on a tour with Hammerlock that week.
Wow.
And he was actually super friendly to me. He really wanted to know about the mask that I had. I didn't have answers to any of his questions. He was coming over asking me the origins and design of this, but I just bought it off a website, dude. I can't say much about it. And I had a bunch of my friends and family came over to see me that day, because they were doing crowds of like 800 maybe back then.
Yeah.
Was an average sort of crowd for them. The Bedworth Civic is a beautiful venue. It's still one of my favourite places. Going back there again in January with Southwest Wrestling, booked a show over there. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I got in the Rumble, and the first thing I did was grab hold of a guy and give him a suplex in the middle of the ring, which is like the worst thing you can do in a Rumble, is start suplexing people when there's 8 guys.
So many bodies.
So I got put straight on that pretty quick. But yeah, it was a rush, man. It was a proper rush.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what companies were you working with at the beginning of your career then? And like, obviously your first like look into, I guess, British wrestling was the NWA UK show with Hammerlock, and before you know it, you are working those shows as well at such an early stage. So how was that like the thing that got you into wrestling, and you're already on those shows?
Yeah, no, it was a goal that I'd set for myself, and I was like, inside a year, all of a sudden I was never the first pick guy. There was a lot of times when like we would hop in the back of a van and lie in the dark in the back of a van for 3-4 hours down to a show, to get there, put all the seats out, build the ring, and then just get told, oh, you just got to play music tonight. Here's a bag of tapes. And that's all you do.
Yeah.
And then drive back, the same 4 hours back home in a dark van for no money. So it wasn't, there was nothing glamorous about it. But then every now and then it would be your turn to go in and do a match, and then you'd go in and you'd get just absolutely destroyed by one of these old shooters. But you just kept coming back the next time, and eventually we sort of became a bit more regular. One of the first guys I saw him tweet today, was Big Dog. So we've got to give Big Dog a shout out. Apparently, he was wrestling as Tank. Well, one of my first matches was with him, actually.
Oh, brilliant. Well, speaking of which, then, can you kindly ask him if he had a schoolboy hero, and who was it? That was Big Dog.
Big Dog, my schoolboy hero was a heavyweight wrestler at Hammerlock. Legend of a guy. I'm still in touch with him these days. His name's Humongous. Humongous was his working name.
Yeah.
Yeah. A guy called Tank, who now works as Big Dog. So big shout out to you there, Big Dog.
So going back to the in the trucks and stuff like that, because I think especially for the younger ones, I do a lot of interviews with the guys at Reach Wrestling, especially their academy, and give them the experience of being their first interview, even if they've just had that one match to give to show what the life of a trainee is like at the moment. I think it's really important, the fact that you did all those hours, very uncomfortable, long days, and you didn't get to wrestle. But then you went home and you did it again the next opportunity.
Yeah.
Would you agree that it'd have been somewhat like a learning experience? Because although you're not essentially wrestling, you're traveling with the guys that may be on the show, you're doing the music, and you're in and around that atmosphere. So surely you're picking up on stuff at the shows, which should have been invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, you on a nightly basis, I'm watching Finn Balor, Johnny Moss, John Ryan. There was a guy called Corrupt down there who was just a massively underrated wrestler. If you can ever track him down, I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was such a good wrestler. John Ritchie was around at the time. He was another great wrestler, and it was like real old school stuff. There was I mean, the thing was at the time, if you weren't getting on the shows, there was no other training school 5 miles down the road that would just let anybody on. You know, that wasn't happening yet. That whole scene hadn't started yet. So it was kind of, you got on there, or that's it. There was nowhere else to go. You could just walk away altogether. And there just wasn't really anything else happening at the time other than FWA.
Yeah. So what other companies were you working with then around that period of time?
Not a lot, really. It was the Hammerlock shows, and then Magic started running local shows under the MPW banner, Women's Pro Wrestling. So really, there was, other than those two, there was not really a whole lot going. Like we picked up like some really small time outside bookings at the time, but nothing even memorable, to be honest with you. It was a big deal to go out and do with the shows, because out of sort of 30 guys at the training school, if you were the guy that was going to do an outside show, all of a sudden you're the big shot in the training school, right? But then you get there and like you're working for no money in front of 20 people.
Yeah. No, you're not going to let them know though. You're walking in doing your Vince McMahon walk next, like who's just got some of his outside bookings.
That's it. So you're the big man for a cup of coffee there, but the reality is that it was nothing really to speak of. Like the thing that kind of happened next that triggered off a lot of things was Magic. He hurt his back. I think he either hurt his back or his knee. I can't remember. I talked to him regularly, but I can't remember what it was. But he, at that point, I think he was a bit burned out, and he walked away from everything altogether. There was another guy who was looking after the training school, but you know, it was, the end was in sight. You know what I mean? And Hammerlock was sort of phasing out at the time as well. And then that's where it came from. Was me and a couple of buddies were in a pub one night, and I basically said, "Oh man, you know, we're not going to get to wrestle anymore. I should run some shows." And then next thing you know, we're hyping up Triple X Wrestling.
What was that like for you then, turning from just wrestler to wrestler and I guess promoter? It seems like you said it yourself, Hammerlock was drying up, MPW was closing down, so it was, well, do I give this up, or you went out there and made your own somewhat wrestling scene?
That's literally what it was like, I thought, if I don't do it, I'm not going to get to wrestle anywhere, because nobody's going to bring a car full of us down to wherever, you know. All Star was kind of a close shop. FWA was like, you had to go down to their school, which I couldn't physically get there. Yeah. So there was like these talented guys that basically weren't to wrestle anymore. So we said, I'll make a place that we can wrestle, and we can just do it our way. You know, we can mess around, and we don't have like, we could, you know, do the gimmick matches that only the top guys got to do. We could do the silly angles that we were never allowed to do. We could go out and do promos, which we were never allowed to do. So it was really just me and a bunch of mates were kind of all kicking in ideas together. And somehow, just because like some guys that wrote on the internet at the time would come and watch, it just started getting a bit of a buzz going around it. And people started going, oh, hey, what's this going on? You know, and it just sort of snowballed into this thing.
Yeah. So what was it like for you then when you've created your own company because there was nothing else available? You started getting buzz on the internet where people were checking it out, and yourself and a few of your peers were getting spots on the card that you weren't really used to, or what was that experience for you? Like, one, being a promoter of a company getting hype, but two, working in these gimmick matches or higher up on the card?
I mean, it was so much fun just actually getting the feedback from the fans and being able to go online like the day after the show and read the reviews that were going up there, because these guys would write these massive reviews in great detail about the show. So it was like you had like 5 show critics at the show every single time that would just go out of their way to make sure everybody knew this bit was great, this bit weren't so good. So we could adapt, you know, we could just cater things to these guys that were speaking about it. And, you know, it's an unthinkable thing now of like pandering to the smart marks is, I guess, what you'd call it now. But at the time, nobody else was doing it. So we were like, well, we'll just be the guys that do that then, you know? If these guys are coming and making a load of racket in every show, they'll be the guys that we are aiming ourselves at and we're marketing ourselves towards. It just seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, 100%. So how long did that go on for with that company?
It sort of had 3 incarnations.
Okay.
So I ran it for a couple of years, and what happened was I had the venue because I was working there and living there at the time. So I got this venue for free, basically, and we could kind of take liberties with it, you know. And then we lost the venue after a couple of years. We tried to move it somewhere else. It didn't really work. So then I said, all right, look, this isn't working out. And the guys that we've kind of put the focus on and now get more opportunities elsewhere. The big one was when we got Daniel Bryan on a show and he wrestled Zack Sabre Jr. Yeah. In like, we're talking a function room in a working club in front of 80 people. I think that was a good day for us. We got like 80 people in for that show. And Zack and Daniel Bryan.
I'm just amazed the fact that you booked what probably would be one of everybody's dream matches. If anybody said, look, if Bryan was to go on the Indies now, who's he facing? A lot of people play Zack Sabre Jr. And there you are in one of the incarnations of your company, 80 people just getting to witness Zack and Daniel. Like, what was that match like, even when he was so young?
Oh man, it was so good. Zack has been another level since day one. Basically, he just gets it. You know, he's just one of these guys that the hold for hold, he can go with anybody in the world. I've no doubt about that. And I remember Bryan turning up and like he was so tired. I think he'd been on the road with All Star at the time, and he'd had to take a flight to Germany and fly back that day. And he was so exhausted. But man, they put on such a great match, and I think the finish got a little bit messed up. I think the referee might have miscounted on the finish or hesitated to count or something like that. So Bryan gets on the microphone then and improvises and says, why don't we make it 2 out of 3 falls? So they just did like another 10 minutes just to sort of make a better finish, basically. You know, so that the fans got a better finish out of the match. And he was so helpful, like hanging around, talking to the younger guys on the show. Yeah. He was just great, man. There was nothing but good things to say about him.
That's some great improvising though. Like, even if that was booked on an indie show now and it's just a singles match and everyone thinks it's over with, and before you know it, 2 out of 3 falls, 2 of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time.
Because there was a moment where like everyone was so disheartened because the match had been so good, and then just something went a bit awry at the finish, and then everyone was kind of really high on the match and then just dropped down like, the finish was a bit blown. And then for him to just of his own accord to just then say, all right, well, let's keep the match going and we'll fix the finish. Yeah, that was incredible.
What time frame was this?
I'm so bad with it. We're probably talking 08, 09, something like that, maybe. And then pretty much after that, it just kind of just felt like things had moved on. Like Zack got a load of attention on him after that match because a lot of people had heard about him. I think don't know if it was directly after that or if it was a little bit later, but he started getting IPW bookings, and then through that he got the Noah show when they came over to the UK. He got put in the dark match on the Noah card, and like because he was kind of the top guy that we were pushing, it just didn't really feel right to not have the end of a story with him. So we just sort of fizzled out at that point. A couple of years later, I had a buddy of mine. Sorry about that. I had a buddy of mine, a guy called Nick Bakewell, who was training the same time as me, up hurting himself and couldn't wrestle anymore. Like doctors told him, you got to pack this in. I think he was just a bit frustrated, and he kind of twisted my arm into relaunching it because I was burnt out. Like I was doing everything myself, basically. Like I was having to go out and poster. I was making all the arrangements, like travel arrangements and things like that, booking the card, and I just got burnt out on it basically because it just wasn't getting results. Like we were enjoying it, and the fans were enjoying it, but I thought it was going to grow, and it just never grew. So just had to put a pin in it at the end. But yeah, Nick came back to me and said, you know, we'll split everything 50-50, and we'll work together on it. So we did a relaunch. That would have been, I don't know, man, maybe 2010, something like that.
Yeah.
And again, we got a couple of years out of that, and then we sort of had another break, and then there was a third incarnation, but it just wasn't the same by then, because the scene had caught up, was I think the problem. The rest of the scene had caught up to what we were doing, but they were doing it in better venues with more money behind it, better organization. We were just the seat of our pants, really. And by the time we'd kind of figured out what we were doing, the rest of the scene had already blown past us anyway. So, you know, it was fighting to lose the battle, really. It wasn't special anymore, because it was just commonplace now, you know.
Yeah. So I believe, if my research had been right, I think the last show had been around 2014. So will we have one more? Will there be one more show like promoted by yourself?
I don't think so. Like, in order to do that, like, I'd want to get back the best roster that we could possibly do.
Oh yeah, I'm expecting you to put Bryan and Sabre Jr. in a 2 or 3 falls.
But even
it might cost a bit.
By the time we did like the second incarnation, our sort of core guys were like Pete Dunne, Mark Andrews, Morgan Webster, Eddie Dennis. You know, same problems again. We were doing good with those guys. We burnt ourselves out. By the time we came back for the third run, those guys were all now no longer available. You know, it was really hard to get hold of any sort of guys like that. Tyler Bate, Chris Brooks, they were our guys, because they were all local. Like, those were all Birmingham guys, and we were in Coventry. So yeah, we got hooked up with them. But then those guys were just so good at marketing themselves that you knew that they knew what they do, and they had a plan. And well, they're living the results right now, and you know, super stoked for all those guys, to be fair, because like, I'm from knowing them from like when they were first coming in to see where they've got to now and see how they did it was, you know, you can't say that they took the back door in anywhere. They and they've gone out and done it, and fair play to them.
Yeah. What was it like, so working those bunch of guys, and you, like you said, a lot of the places you knew were closing, and maybe some of the older heads started stepping away, whether it was just retirement or injuries, and before you know it, you do have this younger crop of guys to work with, and yourself being somewhat the veteran at this point, and more of the senior figure. What was that like for you, and what's your dynamic like? So how do you feel working smaller guys?
I love working smaller guys. Absolutely love it, because I can do all the big stuff that I do. You know, these guys that bounce around like that, and they come in with a guy that, like me, that's twice their size. I've always, like I say, I'm a fan of like the Vader style of wrestling. So you know, Vader used to grab a guy, throw him across the ring, and the Legion of Doom, and Ron Simmons, man, I'm such a big fan of Ron Simmons. The power moves that he used to hit on people, you know, that's the kind of style I love to do. So if I can get a guy that's a lot smaller than me, he can take those moves a lot easier than a big guy can. So yeah, no, I'm happy to work with the cruisers, man.
Yeah. For the life of me, I can't think of the company now, but you'd gone out to Germany and potentially Belgium, I believe it was.
Yeah, the initial trips to Belgium with so they were called BCC, I think, Belgian Catch Company.
Yeah.
So that came about. There was so Magic, my coach, used to work out in France, and there was a British guy that lived over there, was working a manager gimmick for ICWA in France.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that name, so they're like the big touring company in France. So this guy, Nathan, his name is, him and a couple of other guys got together and said, we're going to run some shows in Belgium. And it just so happened he came over for a Triple X show. And he picked a couple of us from that show, maybe like 4 or 5 guys.
Yeah.
I was one of the guys that he picked. I don't think he knew that I was a promoter or anything like that, but I was one of the guys. Just same thing again. I think because I had a look, like I had the mask and everything like that, and I just had an interesting look. Yeah, he picked us to go over there. So that was incredible, really. Like the team that went over there for the first show was like Johnny Moss, Jody Fleisch, Johnny Storm, Zack Sabre Jr., and then me somehow.
Yeah. I think I found it here as well. Like on one of the first matches used again. I'm a fan of, especially when it's done right, and yourself, Dave Mastiff,
Yeah.
in an DQ match in Belgium. So what was it like when you get into work? Like people like Mastiff from the UK again. I know it's from a similar area. You're going out into Belgium, no DQ, and just slugging it out in front of different European crowd. What was that like?
Yeah, man, that was wicked. I did remember that match so well. That I remember the show was like I don't know what the deal was, but like the timings thing there was just so out of whack. So like, I think the show was slated to start at 7 or 8, something like that. And then when the show starts, like it's like an hour late, and the first thing they do is send out some cheerleaders, and then from the cheerleaders they send out an Elvis impersonator. I'm not even making this up. And then Elvis is out there doing his thing, and we're all sitting there with our gear on. There's a big pile of slabs of beer in the corner, and they're just like, yeah, just help yourselves, guys. You know, so everyone's just kind of sitting there with nothing to do, waiting to go on with a ton of beer in the corner. God, I think by the time me and Dave, I did a run in on a match between Brittany Knight, as she was known at the time, Paige now, was wrestling Jetta, and I go in and we got the jump on Paige, and then Dave Mastiff came in for the save, and me and Dave ended up just brawling through the people because they'd already seen everything by the time we got on there.
Yeah.
So we just went, oh man, let's just go over the barriers. There was like 2,000 people in, so we just had a big Bruiser Brody brawl around the whole room. Yeah, we were doing superplexes and stuff like that. We'd got this big giant ring that we weren't used to having in the UK, so yeah, man, we just absolutely went for it, and we had a real slugfest that night. That was so cool.
It's great, especially when I talk to people that went around like the 2010 time to Europe. Everybody just, the face like yourself there just lights up talking about it because it's like a whole other world. One of my friends, Nathan Cruz, he was in France for some time, and he was just saying like how it was like another world with how big it was, and it seems like that for yourself, where a couple of thousand fans, you and Mastiff just brawling throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. I've been out to Europe a couple of times. I went out recently with a post on Instagram about a show I did in Bilbao in Spain. That was in 2012. But that was a really weird experience. It's such a strange city, Bilbao, and we're in this old. I don't think they'd ever had wrestling in the town. I don't know if it was a big thing there, but it was like separate dressing rooms for the good guys and bad guys, that kind of thing. And that was kind of the first time I'd come up against it, but like trying to work a match with guys that didn't speak your language was, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but you struggle through.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned her earlier in Brittany Knight, like Paige. You again in Belgium, herself and Zack against yourself and Jetta, which seems like a good combination. Was that okay? Was that intergender, or was it just a mixed tag?
Wow, I'm struggling to remember that, to be honest with you. I don't really remember that.
I'm just picturing you just throwing Paige around.
We did go. I know we went back for like a second tour, and they did like a 2-day thing in this sports hall, and it was like a village in the middle of nowhere. And I think the first day went really well, and then the second day just bombed. And I think that's the day when we did that match. I don't really remember the particulars. I don't think it was Zack. I think it was Roy Knight, and that was the first time I'd ever worked Roy. I've worked with Roy a bunch of times now, but at the time, like he had this reputation for being, a bit of a tough guy. So I was, a little bit concerned about that. So I think I was more worried about having to contain Roy for the match than I was about anything else. But it turned out to be pretty, sweet as a nut. He was okay. But,
Yeah, I've met Roy a few times, and just the fact that you, like the King of Beasts, is like, Ed is a tough lad. I was a bit worried about it. I'm like,
I think I was Jekyll at the time. I was a lot smaller than I am now. This whole thing is just kind of happened since I turned 30. I suddenly turned into a man rather than a boy pretending to be a man.
So whilst we're on the topic of Europe, then I know yourself mentioned him earlier, Benton Destruction. Love that name as well. I think it's such a good play on it. Your henchman partner, you'd gone to POW in Germany, had a couple of matches out there, including one against Michael Kovac and Doug Williams. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like for you then? Against, like, again, Doug's probably one of the best wrestlers to ever come from the UK.
Yeah. No,
what
absolutely.
was that experience?
It was a great opportunity. Like, I ran into Doug a bunch of times before then, and we'd had Doug on for Triple X before.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the first time I ever got to be in the ring with him. And I mean, he's an absolute class above. You know, he is Doug Williams. He's got the reputation that he has for a reason. He's just so good, so easy to be in there with. That was really. We got to work. I don't know if you heard of the Schützenplatz in Hanover, Germany, where they used to have the tournament. Back in like the 80s and 90s,
Okay.
where everybody used to go, like the Chris Jericho talks about, where he met like Robbie Brookside and those sort of guys. And that was a big deal to me to be able to go over there, where they you read it in books, like the wrestlers used to set up with a caravan over there. Regal used to go over there every summer, and they just kind of set up there for 12 weeks. And it was the same deal. It was the big circus tent in the middle of the town. And they had a few hundred fans in there, and like I say, we did 2 nights there back to back. And the second night we wrestled Doug Williams and Michael Kovacs for the tag championships over there, and great experience. Kovacs is a hugely underrated guy. You know, he's real old school kind of guy. You know, he's one of the last real 90s guys, I would call him.
No, brilliant. So you've seen all these different changes in the British wrestling scene, and you mentioned earlier with some other companies doing similar stuff, and it's good that you've been able to get part of that, whether it was with Attack or Pro Wrestling Chaos, a little later in the career with like PCW and Tidal. And what's your thoughts on the change in the British wrestling landscape from when you first got in until like during this wrestling boom that we've witnessed?
I mean, I don't. It's just one of them. Like I said earlier, trends change in anything, and what's in at the moment is not what was in a year ago. Might not be in again this time next year. And I don't really have an opinion about like the industry as a whole, because I think there's so many different areas to it that if you're not happy doing one thing, you can go somewhere else and do a totally different thing. Like you say, I work holiday camps for All Star Wrestling every year, but then it happened like last summer that I did a week of wrestling the dwarf wrestler for All Star on holiday parks, and then what should have been my day off, I came home, picked up Ben, and we went up to Tidal and we wrestled Crash Boat. Is it Crash Boat? Is the name of the team up there?
I believe so, yeah.
And it's like a totally different thing. And then the next day, I'm straight back out again doing the holiday parks. So, it's just, I love it, man. I just love having so much variety to what we can do, and working in front of an audience one day to the next and one weekend to the next can be completely different, and I quite enjoy that. I don't know about other people. I think it's great.
So before we get into All Star, then, like, when you're thinking back of like some of your favorite matches throughout your career, especially like some of your more recent stuff with Ben as the henchman, like what matches stand out to you as where you think back and you're like, I'm proud of that one?
Wrestling the Hunter Brothers, you probably would expect me to say that is absolutely incredible. Like they're so good at what they do. They can do absolutely any role. They're up for doing absolutely anything. One particular we did at Triple X Wrestling, we did a match called a Barroom Brawl, where we came out in the old Dusty Rhodes hardcore gear, cowboy boots, and cut off check shirts and that. And we grabbed one of the hunters, slid him along the bar like an old western, threw him off the end of the bar, that kind of thing. Lee Hunter absolutely scrambled my brains with a couple of chair shots. We were all bleeding all over the place, and that match for me is one I'll never forget. Certainly, despite the chair shots, so I'll never forget that. That was a great match. Man, so much that we've done. It's hard to. Well, a lot of the favorite stuff I've done has been with All Star as well. To be fair.
Yeah. So let's jump into All Star then. Like, when was the first time you'd appeared with All Star?
So we're probably going back 5 years now, maybe 4 or 5 years. It's not really been that long. Same sort of thing. We'd kind of got ourselves into a bit of a spot where we weren't really progressing too much, and we were looking for new opportunities. And I was back to promoting some shows again, but it was more we were kind of doing a little training school thing.
Yeah.
And we were running some shows in like a local leisure centre. And we were trying to hire a ring, and the guy that we'd booked to hire the ring off, I ran into him at another show, and he rubbed me up the wrong way to the point where I said, I do not want to work with this guy. I don't want to put any money in his hand. So the fella I was like co-promoting with at the time, he said, all right, fair enough, we'll find another ring man. And we got sent James Mason's contact details. So we booked him to come and do this show. And he said he'd work a match as well on the show, which, you're not going to say no to having James Mason appear on your show, right?
No, definitely.
So we said, well, what's the easiest thing that we can have him do? Because I'd never met him at this point. I just knew he was like a full-time guy. He was, a proper wrestler, in my mind. So we said the easiest thing we can give him to do is to be in the tag match with us, because he can just work in the corner. We'll just take some guy in the ring, beat him up, and James can just take the tag at the end, no problem. And based on that, James said to us after the show, have you ever tried contacting All Star Wrestling? I said, no, we're not on that level. And he said, no, I think you'd get on all right there. He told me to send an email, where to send it, said he put in a word. And then like literally 2 weeks later, we had a date. We were debuting.
Nah, to be fair, when you say not at that level, I think give yourself credit. Like, you proved that you are, and I think your the image as well is perfect for All Star, because All Star's not necessarily a wrestling show. It's a wrestling show, but not for wrestling fans. You'll do the camp circuits, and a lot of the time, if you're running Butlins or anything like that, it's just people that may never have seen wrestling before. Coming out and watching it. And I think, like, I guarantee, like, with kids or even with the parents, you come out, they're going to pay attention.
It's an easy story to tell, and it's, like I say, it's a visual thing. If you look at the All-Star Wrestling posters, they are engineered to appeal to everybody, which it might not appeal to like the hardcore fans, like the smart marks, but I think if they were to come along to a show, I think they'd be pleasantly surprised, because the standard is like, it's untouchable. Honestly, it is. Like, Brian Dixon doesn't have bad wrestlers on his shows. He just doesn't do it. He has entertaining wrestlers, talented people. He doesn't. If he sees something in you, he will be very direct and tell you what it is he wants from you. If he doesn't rate you, it'll be, thank you very much, we'll be in touch, and you might not see that guy again. But yeah, it's a very visual kind of wrestling, but there's something for everybody on the show. So you might see us on the show, but then you might see like Joel Redman and James Mason doing a mat-based match, which will absolutely blow away anything else you'll see that week. There's so many different areas to it that I think it sometimes gets written off as being the kind of it's the cheesy holiday camp stuff, and I think there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, even as a fan, that kind of like winds me up. One, I think it's disrespectful to begin with, and it's just ignorant. Like you said, how can you go from you've got you two like absolutely destroying everybody, and then next match you're gonna have James Mason wrestling Joel Redman, and there is that variety of where everything. And I remember speaking to John Schuyler when he came over to and did some of the camps with All Stars, and you've seen, like, we could reel them all off, like some of the best in the world. They come to the UK because it's the best wrestling education in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's seen as the best way to get good very quickly. But I don't think it should necessarily be written off because of that. I think that is a compliment, if anything, to number one, the frequency that you're getting out on the road and doing it and getting the reps in. You know, if you're working for one promotion that runs monthly, that's great. You might get 10, 12 shows out of them. But like All-Star Wrestling, you might get that in a week, you know? You can't buy that kind of experience, which is why guys to this day will fly themselves in from all over the world. Like in an average summer, like I'd take the summer last year, over the 6 weeks that we were doing the parks, I'd have like a guy from Finland, a guy from Germany, a guy from Austria, a guy from France, a guy from Canada, a guy from Japan, New Zealand, that have all come over here because they want to get out on the road with All-Star Wrestling and learn, you know?
No, 100%. And you said it yourself, repetition. Again, not to go too on much of a tangent, but one of my interviews that I did recently was with a lad up in Scotland who's only been about for a couple of years. He did some of the camps whilst he was in Scotland, and he said it was that repetition, because within a week he's probably wrestled more than he would in a month or 2 months, because it depends on the frequency of the shows, and you really get to hone in your. I think the formula, the fact that you could wrestle the same person 3 nights, 4 nights in a row because it's different towns, I think that works massively, because it's, okay, so this worked well, this didn't work well, let's go fix this part. And then it's the next match, right? That went well, this didn't go well. Then you go on to the next part. And before you know it, you've been able to like define these matches. And surely that's the biggest learning curve you can, like the learning experience you can get.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, you can fix it. You know, if you get the match wrong the first time, then that's okay, because you know what you did, and the next time it'll be better. And you learn how to work around injuries. You learn how to work around a low ceiling or a quiet crowd, or you just figure these things out, and it's the quickest way to learn. Like the first night that we did with All Star Wrestling, we were wrestling Charlie Sterling and Dean Allmark as a tag team. I mean, what can you ask for anything better on your first night with a promotion that these are the two guys you'll be wrestling?
Yeah.
And then, like I say, the feedback then immediately was direct, and we knew exactly what we needed to do the next time to be better. And then I think like 2 weeks later, our next show, we were wrestling James Mason and Danny Collins. I mean, people would kill to be in that match, and we got it on like our second or third show that we were doing. Unbelievable.
That's why it baffles me when you've seen not even just fans, but you've seen wrestlers shit on the camps.
Yeah.
And I can't understand that, because like you said, you've just wrestled Danny Collins, James Mason, Dean Allmark, and Charlie Sterling. Like, what better way to be improving your ability of working with the best? You said it yourself, Bryan. He won't hire crap. Like, if he hires them and they're not up to standard, thank you, we'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
And they'll bring that in. And I think it is, and I think I've said this with Joel, and I said it with Joey Seven. It's like, because they can't get over. They ain't got a smart. Wrestling fans go to wrestling because that's what they want to watch. Yeah. So it's in my opinion, I don't know how you feel on this, but surely it's easier to get a reaction from a wrestling crowd than it is for somebody that may never watch wrestling before.
I think so. Yeah, no, absolutely. You can do things to impress a wrestling crowd, but to impress people that don't know anything about it, to make them stick around, they're not laughing. By the end of it, they want to see what happens, and they appreciate the athleticism. The time that we end up doing in there, we end up doing. Sometimes on the holiday camps, you've got to go in and wrestle for 25, 30 minutes twice a day. You can't fake that. You've got to be up to the task. Like I say to people all the time that even though I've been in wrestling for maybe 14 years at the time, I think I really learned to learned to properly wrestle was wrestling Joel Redman in matches at Butlins camps in front of 1,500 people every weekend. I did that for about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And the first couple, it was miserable as well because Joel was running rings around me, and I just couldn't.
He doesn't let up for anybody, does he?
Oh no, he's got absolutely one gear, and it's up to you to keep up with him. And I hated it the first couple of times I did it. I was like, oh God, this is fine. This guy just take it easy. But no, it wasn't for him to come down to where I was. It was for me to get up to where he was, and that's exactly what I needed to do. And then I did the when we were doing like the half term runs, which last like 2 weeks. I got out and wrestled James Mason every night for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, in a very short space of time, that's when I really felt like things had really clicked for me. Was getting in with these guys who are absolutely world class and having the privilege to be in the ring with them and learn from them so frequently. You can't replace that. You can't do that anywhere else in the world.
It's the ultimate experience. Like you mentioned it right at the beginning. I didn't want to jump into it then because I wanted everybody to learn about yourself. So you mentioned you love coaching. You love coaching other wrestlers and stuff like that. What was your first experience of being in that leadership role, trying to coach people, trying to train?
Well, you mean like as a promoter? I mean, I've not really done a whole load of coaching.
Have you done any like seminars or anything like that?
I'm doing a little bit of coaching at the moment. It's not something I've done a whole bunch of. Like we had a couple of trainees that we sort of coached. We had like a very small training group once upon a time. Yeah, I did enjoy it, but I think there's only so much that I can teach people. The best way I can teach somebody is to get in the ring with them in front of an audience and have a match with them. I feel like I am doing some coaching at a training school over in Leicester at the moment from the ground up, which is a great bunch of guys over there. They were really building up some steam. They were doing a lot of sellout shows around that area just before lockdown hit. And since they've been operating again, I've been going over there and doing a little bit of coaching over there, which has been fun for me because I haven't had a match for since March now. We were literally the weekend of that lockdown started. We sort of did 3 shows that weekend, and then the Monday we were told, "That's it, you're going home now," and you stay. Everything's cancelled now. So it's been nice to be able to actually go and get in the ring, hit the ropes a bit, and then tie up with some guys without an audience being there to, for me to trip over and embarrass myself.
Yeah. What would you recommend to those that are just starting out or trying to find their way?
It's all about repetition. The best way that you learn to do this job is to go out and do it. You've got to kind of be thrown in at the deep end, really. Like you can learn holds, you can learn bumps, you can learn moves, but the only way you will learn to perform in a match is to go out and be in a match. Yeah. And again, the best way to do that is on the holiday camps. Like I think I wrestled Joey Seven in one of his first holiday park matches last year. Was it last year or the year before?
Last year.
Yeah, so he came down and did a few days with us on the camps when I was there. I think he did quite a few actually, but I was only on the same run as him for like a week. And I think we got like 2 matches in or something like that. But he's going about it exactly the right way. You just need to get ring time in, really. But going back to what you said at the beginning as well, stand out is another thing that I would say to people. Just try and stand out. Like they used to call it the airport factor or something like that, as in like the wrestlers that people in an airport would turn around and go, "Oh, hey, who's that?"
Yeah.
I think that a lot of that is lost these days, that people don't necessarily, a wrestler can walk past people and look completely unremarkable, which I don't know. It's not why I got into it. Like I was saying earlier, like you couldn't see the Legion of Doom walk past you and just ignore them.
I think they're just average people.
Yeah, that I want to know more about those guys, and I think just try and stand out. Have something remarkable about you. Like you might be the best technical wrestler in the world, and that's your gimmick. That's fine if you truly are the best technical wrestler in the world. But if you're not the best technical wrestler in the world, then you have to find a way to make yourself marketable and make yourself stand out.
Yeah, I can't agree more. You mentioned Joey, and obviously I know you wrestled at Reach in 2019. What's your thoughts on the stuff you've heard from Reach and your experiences there?
Oh yeah, nothing but good things to say about them. Yeah, they looked after me that day. I think it was one of them where I kind of got in on the right place at the right time. That
Yeah.
I was available on the Thursday, and I live in the same town as Millie McKenzie, so I brought her down to a show, and I got a booking as a result of that, which worked out pretty well. There's another piece of advice is to be a driver and be available. But yeah, no, I was looked after well. I think I did like a 5-way or a 6-way match or something
Yeah.
like that. Um, we did talk about me coming in for a second show. Unfortunately, it got a little bit derailed. It's somewhere I'd definitely love to go back and do more with them.
Yeah. So what else have you been doing during lockdown to try and keep ring ready? Like you said, you've not wrestled since it was March time.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can do really. Like, I was lucky enough that I had access to a really good garage gym
Yeah.
during lockdown. So I could go in there and work out and hit a punch bag a little bit, just do some time grams on the punch bag just to try and keep my wind up a bit, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I'm for real 25 stone in that sort of area. So I'm a guy that naturally would gasp very quickly in the rest of the match. So for me, like if I was off for sort of 3 or 4 weeks, it's very hard for me to get back into that ring shape, So I'm obviously concerned about the first few matches back are going to be hell, really. I think it's going to be the same for a lot of guys. So that's why I'm happy now that I've got a training school that I can go over to and I can do some time in the ring. So yeah, that's been very helpful. I've been down there for about sort of 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
And things are starting to come back.
So like once things do go back to some normality, what's left like on your goals? Like, is there anybody in particular that you want to get in the ring with, whether that's singles or as a tag with as the henchman?
Man, there's loads of guys. I see guys on, I'm not super in touch with the current wrestling scene, but like I see things more like I think more and more now this is a business about like short clips rather than whole matches. You can get a lot of attention on you from short clips. And I see, you see stuff flashes up on Twitter all the time. You're like, oh, hey, check that out. That guy's got something about him, and you can blow up on stuff like that. So, yeah, make yourself giftable is probably the way to go these days. But yeah, like goals wise, USA definitely. Japan is somewhere that I've always wanted to go to Japan, and that's still very much something I'd like to do if I can.
Yeah. What about Japan? Is it that you like, apart from the obvious, like, is it New Japan or 'cause I can see, especially your star, like all Japan embraced like the big lads, the heavyweights, the tag team wrestling. Like if you had your pick of the place, like what company would you want to be out in Japan with?
Oh man,
Or is it just the experience itself?
just to experience the culture, experience the style out there, see if there is still that demand for the style that I do and the look that I present over there, because I don't think there's a ton of it these days like there used to be. Like in the 90s, it was they would take like the heavyweight gaugings over there. I don't think it's such a big thing anymore, but it's certainly something that if it ever comes back, I'd love to be at the front of that. Yeah,
no, definitely. And what's your thoughts on, so to wrap things up then, with when you got in, we spoke about there weren't many options. And to maybe get to America, to get to, say, the likes of WWE, it was so hard because only a couple of people had selected to go across. Now we've got the NXT UK, we've got the NXT, we've got the WWE UK Performance Center based. What's your thoughts on them setting up here in the UK? And is that something you would want to have a look at, whether it's just a one-off or if it was a place to potentially call home?
I'm so open to that. Absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone that says that they wouldn't be interested, they've either got a very definite plan or they're just straight up lying to you. I think it's something that everybody should at least consider it. If it becomes an option to you, yeah, I can't see why anybody would dismiss that. It's the biggest company in the world, and I can't imagine a time when it won't be. Why would you not want to be involved in that? As yeah, certainly a goal of mine would be to work with WWE in some capacity. NXT UK, I think, yeah, I could. It's been said to me like that people could imagine the Henchmen as working in the tag team roster on NXT UK. It's certainly something I'd love to do. I've not had any conversations there, to be perfectly honest with you, but yeah, I mean, if it ever came up, yeah, sure, I'd be 100% happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be great to see. You mentioned quite a lot of people that are currently there earlier on, so it isn't as if you're going to be going in there working with people you've never worked with before, and it would be great to see because again, wrestling to me it's a visual thing, and
yeah,
you've got it's a bit like how Mastiff's being presented on NXT UK. He's on TV, you pay attention. You guys go on TV, they're going to pay attention.
Yeah, no, of course. Like, I'm doing a lot of single stuff now as well. So even if it's not the tag team, I'd love to just in any capacity. Yeah, I'd be certainly open to that.
Oh, brilliant! Well, Jim, it has been like amazing to talk to you, to see all the old school side of things and go back way back when you first started out and to see the change in there. So again, thank you for coming on the show.
No problem, man. Thank you very much for the invite, and all the best with the show in the future.
Thank you. So where can people find you on social media?
I knew I should have written these down. I'm like Henchmen Wrestler on Twitter. Henchmen Gym on Instagram. Most of it happens on Instagram these days. That's the platform I mostly use. If you search King of the Beasts or Big Jim on Twitter, I'm sure you'll find me.
Brilliant. So everybody go make sure you give them a follow, especially since he's going to make himself gifable in the future. So it's great to see you venturing out on more places. Hopefully next time you're in Tidal, like that's next city over from me, being up here in Hull. So yeah, I'm based in Hull.
I've had some conversations with Tidal quite recently, and I think you don't want to say too much, but you'll definitely be seeing us there next year.
Oh, brilliant. There is a team that have had a couple of things with Tidal, and again, I spoke to them a lot like yourselves, just starting out in recent Rogan, very smash mouth and bruises, very different. So
I've seen pictures of these guys on Twitter. Yeah, they look like guys that we'd be in for a good fight with. So yeah, I'm all up for that. Working the Lion Kings up there. I don't know if you were around for that one, but we had a couple of matches with them. We had one at Tidal and one at Wrestling Resurgence in Leicester, which is a fantastic promotion, which everyone should check out. But yeah, working with the Lion Kings, man, they're big, tough boys. So that's just the kind of thing that we're into at the moment. So yeah, more of that, please.
Brilliant. Well, again, all the best. Thank you for coming on. Everybody, make sure you go follow Jim on social medias. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you're not going to miss out on any of the other stuff that I've got coming up. And again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.